All right, guys, Clarkey here with the Set of Six podcast. I'm back. I'm with my usual co-host. We have Oliver from NRL, My Opinion. How are you, Oz?
I'm doing pretty good, and we're also here with the new co-host as well, Mini Clarkey. He's here, and he's staying forever. I'm sorry, guys, but he just is.
With a very bold grand final prediction there. So we've got
Yep.
six great topics, as always, for you guys here today. Number one, we're going to talk about the Lebanon situation, what's going on over there, because if you haven't seen the headlines, the entire international team has just been suspended. Number two, we're going to talk about some origins, some of the changes that were made. 3, we're going to go over the NRL CTE issues. 4, contenders and pretenders. And number 5, we're going to finish on one signing for 2020. And another one I missed in there, guys. Sorry, the judiciary hearings. But before I continue, let me say a very warm welcome to the man who probably knows the most about International Rugby League in Australia, Michael Carboni from the Chasing Kangaroos podcast. Absolute pleasure to have you here, man. How are you?
Hey, good, Clarkey and Ollie. Thanks for having me on, boys. I don't know if I know the most about International Rugby League in Australia, but I certainly do try my best to learn as much as I can and share it with my listeners on my podcast and on my social media pages. So thanks for the kind words, boys.
Well, I don't know about you, Oz, but if you had to put $100 on someone that knows the most, I've got my money on Michael. What about you?
Yeah, what I see on your page just astonishes me sometimes. Like, I think I saw once you had I forget, it was like the South Sudan League or something, or the South Sudan national team, and I was like, Jesus Christ, how do you know about that?
Yeah,
it's great.
Where is he getting this information? It's incredible, and what you're doing is absolutely commendable, man, because, it's too easy for someone to start up an NRL page because all the information, it's just there in our faces 24/7, but as you I didn't even realize this till yesterday, chasing kangaroos, because the world is chasing the Australian kangaroos. For the longest time, Michael, I sat down like, what does his name mean? Sitting there listening to it. And I finally got it, and I felt so dumb once I did. But we're going to ask you a little bit about what's going on in Lebanon. Before we do, guys, if you could pause the podcast right now at Chasing Kangaroos Podcast on Instagram and Chasing Kangaroos Podcast on Facebook. If you head there, you can find all of Michael's podcasts. Absolutely fantastic, and it is an eye-opener, guys. I can't recommend it enough because there is more to the world of rugby league than the NRL. Believe it or not, and if you don't believe it, head to the podcast, guys. But Michael, we need to find out what the hell is going on Lebanon. So their whole international team has just been suspended. Tim Manor, Robbie Farah, Abbas Miski, Adam Dowie. There's some huge names in there. Mitchell Moses, was he part of that suspension? I believe he was.
He was, yeah, he was. It's crazy. It's crazy, and I don't even think many people surrounding Lebanon, the Lebanese rugby league, know what's going on. It's a really messy situation, and plenty has happened. But where do you want me to start, guys? Tell me what you know, and then I'll try and expand on your knowledge a little bit and see if I can fill in some of the gaps.
So we spoke about this briefly before, and Oz, we have to admit we didn't know too much, did we?
No,
not much at all. But from what I think I know, there's an issue with the domestic competition, and they're not trying to grow the game or funding it appropriately, I believe. And as a result, Robbie Farah and some of the larger known Lebanese players were rebelling against that. And they weren't actually going to play this year, only there would have been potential World Cup ramifications if they sat out another test. So subsequently they did play, but they chose to tape over the Lebanese logo because they don't believe what the local government or football federation's doing in Lebanon. Am I somewhat on the right track there, Michael, or way off?
It's crazy. There's basically two sides to the story, and what you know is one of those sides in a nutshell, I suppose. But if you take it all the way back to the World Cup in 2017, and what you guys will know is that Lebanon surprised a lot of people, and they did really well with the likes of Robbie Farah, Mitchell Moses, Josh Mansour, etc., etc.
Yep.
They did really well. But if you take it back even further still, rugby league's actually been growing in Lebanon since 2002. So they've had a university competition since 2002. And they've grown. They've got rugby league in schools. They've got a senior competition, or they've had a senior competition with up to 8 teams. So rugby league in Lebanon was growing, and it's mainly because of the support from the Lebanese, Australian Lebanese heritage players and fans as well. So very similar to what's going on in places like Italy and Malta and Turkey and Greece and things like that. Mm-hmm. But Lebanon were growing on very quickly. And growing very quickly. So what happened at the World Cup in 2017 was really exciting because all of a sudden we had a strong Lebanese team that almost beat Tonga. So everyone's talking about how good Tonga is. Well, Lebanon nearly beat them. Like, it was a really close game. So it was really exciting stuff. But since then, it's kind of all fallen apart. And what's happened is there's been a bit of a schism between the clubs over in the domestic league. So there's about 6 clubs over there at the moment. 3 of them are on board with the Lebanese Rugby League Federation, but 3 of them are against the Rugby League Federation. And depending on who you're listening to, it's pretty dirty and pretty crazy. So on one side of the fence, the Rugby League Lebanese Federation are saying, or the Lebanese Rugby League Federation, they're saying that they're trying to improve the quality and standards of their competition, so they've put it on hold for the last year until the clubs can all get on board and make sure that they're playing all of their games and be financially viable, etc., etc. But on the other side of the fence, the 3 clubs that are opposing the Lebanese Rugby League Federation are saying that, hey, they've actually been standing down. They've actually, I guess, gone on strike. They're standing down from competition because they believe that the board members were illegally elected and that there may be some financial misconduct at play. So depending on which side of the story you believe, it's all very dirty, very messy, very tricky. Robbie Farah came out on NRL 360, which you would have seen, and made it all very public, and he's basically been very vocal in his support of the 3, I guess, opposing clubs.
Yep.
And that's kind of where this has all stemmed. The guys, the Australian heritage guys and the Lebanese guys that played against Fiji a couple of weeks ago during the international weekend, they said they were going to cover the cedar tree emblem. Now, over in Lebanon, what you need to understand is it's actually illegal to do that. It's punishable by law, and you can actually spend some time in jail. That's right. You can spend some time in jail, believe it or not. So I guess you imagine if someone covered up the Australian coat of arms, it's kind of like that. You wouldn't go to jail here. We have a lot more freedom of speech here in Australia, but it would be quite offensive, and that's kind of what has happened. So now, basically what they have aimed to do. And let me know if I'm going too far or if you have any other questions, guys.
Yep.
But what Robbie Farah and co have aimed to do is try and get the Rugby League International Federation to step in and investigate what's happening. So they're actually going to be a part of an investigation now at this misconduct meeting with the players if they appear. And hopefully the RLIF get to the bottom of what's going on there and try and find an amicable solution for all parties in the Lebanese Rugby League Federation.
So from what you just said, I've got 3 further questions.
Hit me.
Number 1, I read a column, obviously I'm not in the know, but I did read somewhere that upon them, obviously majority of the playing squad does reside in Australia, but they are likely to be arrested the moment they step foot on Lebanese soil. Is that correct?
I can't confirm that,
okay.
But they may be in trouble should the Lebanese Rugby League Federation decide to push that further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you spoke a bit about the domestic competition there, and I want to ask, is the competition currently running or still stalled?
It's been stalled since 2017, so there's 3 clubs that are on board with the Lebanese Rugby League Federation. There is a rumour that one of those clubs is actually a shell club. It only exists on paper. And the reason, if you believe the other 3 clubs involved, the reason that club was formed was to allow more votes for the current board of the Lebanese Rugby League Federation. It's very messy, boys. Like it's hard to know what exactly to believe is going on.
Yeah, I'll just pause. Oz, have you got any questions for Michael at this stage?
No, the only question I really had was the one you asked, about the possibility of these players getting arrested. Now, I don't know too much about the Lebanese players. However, I believe there would be at least a couple. Are there any players in the Lebanese side that were playing in that Lebanese league or who do reside in Lebanon?
Yeah,
also, there would have. So
there
what happened
to
them?
Well, nothing. So this is the thing. So I guess the Lebanese Rugby League Federation haven't decided to press charges, unless they're not back in Lebanon yet. I'm not too sure. Again, I haven't heard too much about that. But look, there will be a misconduct hearing. So I'm not sure if that'll be happening in Lebanon or in Sydney or where that will actually be happening. So we'll have to watch this space on that one.
And Michael, obviously we don't want to keep you all afternoon, but I've got one more very important question, given your extensive knowledge around the international game. What does this mess mean for Lebanon? Can this affect them potentially being in the next World Cup? Or, I mean, where do they go from here, in your opinion?
it's a really sad state of affairs because, like I said earlier, Lebanon had a lot of potential and really could have grown. Especially at the moment, we're seeing a lot of development in the Middle East and Africa. There's a Middle East Africa Championship happening this year in Nigeria, which you guys can hear more about if you follow my page and listen to my show.
Yep.
But I won't go into too much detail there right now. What it could mean, so part of as a full member of the Rugby League International Federation, one of the policies is you need to have a consistent competition in play, more than 4 or 5 clubs, more than 10 weeks per year. Well, Lebanon haven't done that for the last couple of years, so theoretically, the RLIF could pull Lebanon from the 2021 World Cup because they do have an automatic place there. They could pull them from the Cup. Potentially, they could be pulled from the World Nines later this year at Bankwest Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that's what will happen. Hopefully, like an amicable conclusion or resolution can happen and Lebanon take their place. But I've certainly heard a few people calling for Lebanon to be stood down if they can't come to an amicable conclusion.
I think one thing is for certain, this is an absolute mess. They've gone from 2017 being coached by the current New South Wales Blues coach, Brad Fittler. Great success in the World Cup. Very, very well. Didn't embarrass themselves. Played excellent throughout the whole competition. From there, they've now lost their domestic competition. And from what it sounds, the board, the players, it's all in tatters. And I do think it's going to have some serious ramifications. Now, Carbs, thank you so much for coming on to the Set of Six podcast. Before we let you jump off, just one more chance for yourself. Plug everything because we love your work and we want to give you the opportunity.
Thanks, boys. I love your work too. So thanks very much for having me on. Guys, you can find Chasing Kangaroos. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Follow along. Let us know what you think and ask me. Feel free to DM me, ask me any questions you like. I'm always happy to have conversations, discussions, and try and educate people on International Rugby League. I've also got the podcast, Chasing Kangaroos podcast, which is really how this all began. I released an episode this morning, which I recorded last night, and I do go into some detail about the Lebanese situation, amongst other things as well. So give that a listen. If you're that way inclined, if you like International Rugby League or want to know more about rugby league all around the world, then this could be for you. So, yeah, happy to have anyone on board.
Absolutely.
Cheers, boys.
Carbs, absolute pleasure. Take care.
Good luck, boys. Bye.
Thanks.
All right, guys. So that was Michael Carboni from Chasing Kangaroos podcast. Obviously, we weren't too familiar with that situation, and we do want to not only give our opinions on this show, but also try to give you accurate information. And I can't thank him enough for coming on there and doing just that. That was an excellent insight. And like we spoke about, whether you're watching the video on YouTube or listening with your ears, strangely enough, you do listen with those, on Spotify, iTunes, via a podcast, etc., you know exactly where to go to find Michael. Let's move on to a bit of Origin talk. We've still got some NRL talk later in the show, guys. Let's move to Origin. First question I want to ask you, Oz.
Yep.
Kalen Ponga out for the Maroons. Well, I don't need to ask how big it is. I mean, it's fairly obvious. Can they win without him? Let's go probably the most hard-hitting question. Can the Maroons win an Origin game at this stage without Kalen Ponga?
Yes, they can, but it's obviously not going to be as easy as it would be.
Yep.
They still have a lot of great players who are currently at Ponga's level or maybe just under him. I still believe they can. However, I don't like this decision of moving Cam Munster to fullback. A lot of people do. I don't. I know the other day you said to me that you didn't necessarily agree with it either. Have you sort of come around on Munster playing at fullback, or because it's been confirmed today that he will?
I do like Munster playing fullback on the premises that Corey Norman has been selected. I think if Michael Morgan was to move to fullback, Gagai was to move into centre, and Kyle Felt on that wing, then I wouldn't see a reason to move Munster to fullback. Look, I didn't know this. I thought he was a lot less experienced as a fullback as opposed to 5'8". 50 games of NRL at fullback, I was 51 at 5'8". So we're talking a difference of one game here. It's not much at all. It's just he hasn't played there for some time. That's probably the biggest change for Queensland there, and I definitely agree. I think they can win without Ponga, but I almost reduced them to a 5% chance just because he was so influential. I'm willing to write game 2 off because we didn't see anything from Queensland at all. So I'm going strictly off game 1 here. He was so influential to their attack. Everything came off the back of him. And I do think Munster can be that man. The issue is, now Munster is not at 5'8". and you're replacing him with Corey Norman, who I don't class in the same league as Cameron Munster. I have Cameron Munster up in my elite 5'8s, Luke Keary's, James Maloney, Cameron Munster, and then you have your sub-elite, just under. Corey Norman is in that category. Probably another example is Jack Whiten, I suppose, sub-elite.
Did you
Milford? Yeah, probably there. So yeah, you are taking Munster out of probably his natural position these days, which could come up trumps. But I mean, for Queensland at this stage, when you lose by 32 points, is there really anything wrong with throwing the dice and having a bit of a gamble?
I guess not, but just to sort of refute what you've said, on Kalen Ponga and Munster as well, you said Ponga was very influential, especially in game one. I'd argue he can't be as influential if Cam Munster is in the halves. He helped him out a lot. A lot of people online said that Cameron Munster is more of a fullback than a 5'8" when I put my post out today. I think that is pretty ridiculous. I know that he played his first 50 NRL games at fullback. Like he said, he's played 51 at 5'8". However, Cameron Munster is a premiership winner in the 5'8" position. I believe he was playing 5'8" when Queensland won Origin in 2017. At least played a game there, I think.
I think that was when he came in. He might have made his debut that year in Game 3, and he played spectacular. I could be wrong, though, but I believe so.
And you know what? He's also played since then. He's played Origin at 5'8".
Mm-hmm.
Basically, every time he's been in a big game situation, he's been at 5'8".
Mm-hmm.
When Melbourne are playing well, which they pretty much always are, he's playing at 5'8".
Yep.
He is a 5'8" now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're a Queenslander, obviously. Just in general, would you rather have Cam Munster playing fullback for Queensland, or would you rather have him playing 5'8"?
Absolutely 5'8". If we have a fully fit team, for me, Cameron Munster is a 5'8". He possesses qualities of a fullback, but he's also got such great vision, passing, kicking that 5'8" is his natural position for me these days. And, pending Billy Slater's retirement, if he was a fullback, and Bellamy, just because he had Pappenhausen, Drinkwater at Hughes at the club, one thing we know about Bellamy is he always picks his best 17. He always has. He's never favoured players. If someone plays bad, the next game, they're on strike. You're one strike, you're out the next week. That's how he coaches. So Munster would be the fullback at Storm if that was his best position. And, the fact that Craig Bellamy, the Graham's best coach at the moment, thinks he isn't a fullback, that's enough evidence for me. Let's talk about some other changes. Yep. Sims and Cleary out. Pearce and Clemmer in for the Blues. Is this better for their side or worse?
The Clemmer coming in is definitely better. The Pearce coming in for Cleary, I don't know. I just don't know. And do you mind if I say my little piece now on Pearce? I know I said off camera, I say my little piece. I know online a fair bit. I've been saying in posts on the podcast that, I think Pearce's time is done at Origin. However, if he was to be picked, and I guess I didn't emphasize this enough, I would be okay with it now. I believe he would do better now, okay? I still would prefer Chad Townsend come in, and I believe the only reason Chad Townsend wasn't picked over Mitchell Pearce is because of the media influence talking certain players up, which I'm not bagging out the media for that. Pearce is a good player. He does deserve it. And you know what? That's a topic that we can get into on an entirely different video. But I just personally believe, because the stats are very similar, I believe you were the one who did bring it up, that Townsend is better at playing as the dominant half and as playing... as the half that takes a step back, the Robin to the Batman, as you've said. He can do that, and I believe he complements Maloney personally better. Yeah, but we've got Pearce now. I don't mind that, especially because I did see his interview on Sunday night with Matty Johns. I liked the fact that he owned up to his actions. As in, he didn't say, I was actually a bit better than people are making out, this happened, that happened, I was playing against the best Queensland side in the world. No, he didn't let what the media says about him and, bring him up. He just went against all that and he said, I've played bad in the past. I'm owning up to that. Now I'm looking towards the future. So I do like that. The one thing that I'm a little worried about is that Pearce won't take enough of a step back to Maloney, and that he'll try to do a bit more than he should. And arguably, that's what let him down when he played Origin before. He tried to do too much, cracked under the pressure, and it led to mistakes.
Yeah,
I think, yeah.
That's the really difficult thing, because both of those men do play both sides of the field. Maloney in Game 2 played both sides of the field. The reason Penrith have been playing poor this year is because Ivan Cleary wanted Nathan to direct the show and play both sides of the field, and he had Maloney secluded to, I believe it was the right side. I could be wrong there. James Maloney's not the sort of player you seclude to one side of the field. He's the sort of player that you want popping up in your backline, directing plays on both sides of the field. And the exact same thing can be said for Mitchell Pearce, which does raise, obviously, big question marks, like you said. And I do agree on what you were saying with Townsend. He's shown this year, when Sean Johnson was injured, when he had young Kyle Flanagan come into the side, he can play the dominant half role, and the Sharks were arguably better than they were now back then with Flanagan in the side. But that's a story for another day. But the point is, Townsend played the dominant role. Whereas when he won a premiership with James Maloney, which is more recent than Mitchell Pearce, by the way, he was the least dominant half. Maloney was the dominant half, playing both sides. Townsend was on his side with his great short kicking game. The year they won the premiership, his short kicking game, he forced more goal line dropouts than anyone else. And I do think he complements Maloney better in the fact he knows how to play one side. Pearce and Maloney, as I said, probably repeating myself a little bit too much, they play both sides, which does creep a little bit of doubt in. And as a Queenslander, I have to admit, any change is good change at this stage. Even the David Clemmer change, it is good, because we need to mess with that winning formula in some way, shape or form. And, when you win by 32 points, all the pressure's on the Maroons now. All the pressure was on the Blues after Game 1. But all the pressure is, as I said, it is 100% with the Maroons now. And any change is good change. Even though we're bringing in players like Pearce and Clemmer, as a Queenslander, I feel more confident with Pearce in that side than I would Cleary. Even though Pearce is in better form, it's just a fact, him and Maloney are very, very similar players.
Yeah, I think what Brad Fittler needs to do, Mitchell Pearce is heading in tonight. What he needs to do, not obviously straight away, once he's settled in, he needs to grab Mitchell aside, maybe Maloney with him, and say, Mitchell, I don't know what it was like when you were playing Origin before. From what I understand, you were the main guy. However, it is James Maloney's side now. I know it may be hard, but you do need to take a step back. I think Pearce will understand. I think we
need you to do a role, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if Mitchell Pearce only got the ball 1, maybe 2 times a set. I think it's Maloney's show.
Because when you play Pearce like that, can he really get into the game? Because when he's in the game, he's shown us he can win man of the match 5 matches in a row.
I'd argue he doesn't necessarily have to with Maloney there. He doesn't necessarily need to get into the game and play with form. He just needs to have a solid performance.
Defensively and with his short kicking, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing that that's the question as well, a little bit of defence, because Nathan Cleary, for all his faults, he was great defensively for New South Wales. He was. And as a half, obviously, he wasn't the best defensive player, but he was a good defensive half. Mitchell Pearce is better running the ball than Nathan Cleary. He is better on the attack than Nathan Cleary. But defensively, Pearce is pretty good too. But I just need to see that in the Origin situation, I guess. So if he can get that down pat, I think he's a good role player for Maloney to take the reins and just go with it.
Yeah. All right, guys, we're going to move on to tackle 3. We're going to talk about the judiciary hearings. Hopefully, if you are listening or watching the podcast, you're enjoying it. Just some food for thought there, guys. Does Pearce and Maloney play too similar football, and could that potentially disrupt the Blues? If you're looking at the screen right now, watching on video, you will see both my fingers crossed, as I am a Queenslander. Let's move on to the judiciary hearings, Oz. Let's start with George Burgess first. So originally 12 weeks, 25% off for an early guilty plea, I believe, down to 9 weeks for what I thought was a pretty nasty eye gouge. And I understand he's obviously going through a tough time, and et cetera, but I didn't enjoy the comments from the Rabbitohs boss, Shane Richardson. He came out and pretty much said that George is a family man, he loves his family, and this is a tragedy. For me, a tragedy is if Robbie Farah had have permanently had his eyesight damaged by what was an evil act. Here's what I commented on the NRL's post. I said, and it was pretty popular, a lot of support behind it. I said, I'm sure George is going through a very tough time, and I usually like to give our players benefit of the doubt. But that was one of the worst things I've ever seen on a football field. Pure evil with the potential to permanently damage someone's eyesight. Not cool. What do you make of the situation? Do you give him any leeway, or was it completely intentional in your opinion?
I don't give him any leeway, but this is a very unpopular opinion, and I've said it before. You are going to disagree with me. I'd give him about 4 to 6 weeks. Hear me out. Hear me out. Hear me out. One, we've seen worse things happen before, and players probably get less time out. Robbie Farah was not permanently injured, thank God, and was not really injured by it. You know what I mean? He's okay. Where we've seen instances, even accidental, where players have been suspended whilst injuring other players. I think the 12 weeks is definitely warranted if Robbie Farah was injured substantially by this.
But the potential is if they don't set a tough precedent, then does the tough precedent only come in when someone does unfortunately suffer permanent damage? Because for me, I'm happy for him to be suspended for the rest of the regular season.
Look, personally, I don't mind, right? I'm a Titans fan. If he's suspended for 12 weeks, I don't really mind.
Yeah,
but
finals football doesn't concern us.
Exactly. If I'm looking at this, purely neutral, you got to sort of look at both sides, and I think it was intentional. Mm-hmm. It's happened before, so extended. I'd say probably about 6 weeks. Okay. Right, but if Farrell was to get injured, then I would have gone to 9 to 12 because we have had worse incidents, in the past where players have gotten injured. I don't remember their exact names, unfortunately, but 2004, I believe it was, a player from the Storm knocked out a player from the Tigers. I'm sure you know the incident I'm talking about, at least vaguely. It was pretty...
With a tackle or a punch?
It was a punch. It was a punch, and I believe the player got knocked out and was out for a little bit, and the player who gave the punch was out for about 20 weeks or something.
I can't think of it.
2004. We can get it up after the podcast. I'm sure someone listening will know.
We'll know exactly what you're talking about.
We'll know. Yeah. But I don't even know the players' names or anything. I just remember the incident. I'm sort of just leaning towards the lesser sentence here. I can understand the longer sentence. However, I do believe the resulting impact on the player who has been, labelled the victim, so Robbie Farah in this case, I think we should consider what has happened to them as well. And Robbie Farah, thankfully, is okay. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to take that into consideration a bit. And 6 weeks is still a long time. Most suspensions are only a week or two. I'm trying to think of it like that as well. 6 weeks is still a long time. But now they've given him 9 weeks. He's going to miss the rest of the regular season. But he's going to be back for finals football anyway. So,
yeah.
And I'm sure he won't re-offend, although we said that last time. So,
well, this is one of the times I'm going to have to disagree with you because I'm completely fine with the 9. I probably would have been pushing more towards 12 weeks. I feel fights, punching, head-high tackles. Yes, there is obviously some risks there involved, but for me, when you start putting your fingers in someone else's eyes, the risk is too high. Okay. And in this particular situation, the NRL judiciary only had 3 eye gouge situations to go off in modern rugby league. The other one was George Burgess against Watene Lesniak, and the other one was Hudson Young earlier this year. So Burgess' most recent one on Robbie Farah was the 3rd ever recorded. I know people will say Maguire has done it earlier this year, but he was found guilty of contrary conduct or something else. He was not found guilty of an eye gouge. I know Cameron Munster did not report it on the field, guys, but you have to remember the match review committee also goes through the football footage extensively, and they weren't able to find an eye gouge there. So whilst it might have looked bad for us on television, we have to remember they have hundreds of angles that we don't have where they can slow that down and comprehensively review whether there was an eye gouge there or not, and they deemed there wasn't. Because I am seeing so much online and stuff against Maguire. So we've only got 3 in history, and for me, the risk is just too high. Permanently damage someone's eyesight. I don't think it's cool. It's not in the spirit of rugby league. And if they had to give him 15 weeks, Oz, I don't think too many people would have sat there and gone, oh, that was really harsh, purely because what he did was so bad. But you're probably looking at it more from a less passionate, more probably systematic approach.
I'm trying to look at as many angles as I can. Sort of, what we've seen in the past, big suspensions from the past and what they were from, the effect on Robbie Farah. There are quite a few people who are saying he should never be allowed to play rugby league again because of this. And I think that is too harsh. I think that's a bit ridiculous when,
we have had much worse.
We have had much worse, exactly. And I'm not just talking about injuries, bring it up, but we've had players do stuff off the field and have been at least banned from the NRL. So I don't think that really is comparable. So I don't think he deserves to be banned for life. Definitely not.
Yeah. Let's move on to the Tariq Sims case. I didn't follow this one too much. I did put it up when it was breaking. I think that was about 10 p.m. last night. I didn't follow it so closely, but the bottom line is I'm not concerned how many weeks he's suspended for. It's 1, I believe, so he'll just miss the Origin game, maybe back for the Dragons. And I'm actually thinking, so if the Dragons had have named him this weekend, Oz, for the Saturday game, he could have had his suspension there. And then Freddie Fittler, we're bringing him into Blues camp. But then I suppose he's not training with the team. But they definitely could have loopholed that if Mary had named him even in the reserves at 21 jersey. But they definitely could have loopholed that.
Well, what I'm thinking here is that, sorry, Tariq, I think Freddie prefers Clemmer over Sims because I don't know about you, but when I uploaded the Blue Squad on Monday night, there was only one complaint people had, and it was where the F is David Clemmer. And I sort of think Freddie, I mean, he was guilty, right?
You thought he was guilty?
Freddie knew. I thought he was guilty.
Okay. I mean, Freddie, there was contact with the head, but
yeah, it's not that close to me as other people say. Contact with the head, that it's guilty to me. But what I'm thinking is, Freddie probably knew he wouldn't have got off. Probably just reviewing it, and he thought, okay, I want to bring Clemmer in, but I also want to show Tariq Sims that he is still sort of a valued member of the team. So I'm not just going to
disrupt
not name
any
him.
Sort of cohesion.
No, exactly. Because Tariq Sims can't go then, I wasn't going to get picked anyway. Freddie was like, no, he's in the side, and he didn't name Clemmer, and people were blowing up about it, but come on. Freddie literally said in the interview on Channel 9, I believe it was, when the teams were announced, when the blue side was announced, he said, if Tariq Sims gets suspended, then David Clemmer will be coming in.
Mm-hmm. And then I watched an NRL 360 interview where they were interviewing Blues advisor Danny Badiris, asking him how hard it was to leave out Clemmer, etc. And his answers were so vague. You could tell he didn't have any appropriate answers. Why was Clemmer left out of the side, Danny? We love Clemmer. He's a big part of our team. We love him. And, really hard decision. Just didn't answer the question at all. I think even the Blues, deep down, maybe knew. But for me, there was contact with the head, and I think that's what got in the suspension in the end. It just depends how you deem that contact with the head. If it was dangerous, completely accidental. But for me, what I saw, and obviously this... here you go. I'm a little clout chaser. I've been commenting on all the NRL stuff. Here's what I commented yesterday on the NRL post also.
Yeah.
I said, I can't say I agree with this decision, and I am a Queenslander. I haven't reviewed the footage as extensively as the judiciary, obviously, but I saw a back rower putting pressure on a half and doing his job well to force a forward pass. As a result, I gained 100 followers from that comment. So obviously, Dano's...
Dragons fans.
Yeah, a couple Dragons fans are now a member of Clarkey's NRL column. Welcome if you're now listening.
A few Cowboys fans unliking, maybe.
Yeah, probably lost a couple Cowboys fans. But I don't feel strongly towards either way, Oz. I'm not strongly saying, wow, I can't believe this is the most rubbish. This isn't Billy Slater's shoulder charge all over again. This is to a lesser degree of that. And I'm not sitting here saying, he's completely innocent, because there was contact with the head. I think if I was the judiciary and in a perfect world, I'd say, look, you are borderline from that. We're giving you 95 points. So if you do anything else wrong, you need to sit out. That would have been what I'd done in a perfect world. What about yourself? Would you suspend him or let him play?
I probably still would have suspended him. I know it sounds hard, but what's sort of the main thing we know that gives away a penalty in rugby league? A head-high tackle. It was high. I mean, penalty at the least. However, I do think because of sort of the aftermath, how Morgan did have to get checked, I believe it probably did warrant the suspension. We're talking 1 week here still. If it was any other week, we'd probably be, okay, 1 week suspension, that's probably fine. But because he's missing out on Origin, there's a bit more of a discussion.
Yeah, I think you're exactly on the mark there. If he was missing out on a normal, regular NRL game, everyone would say, 1 week's fair. But because it's Origin, the biggest game of the year, the decider, there's so much more media attention around it, and people's opinions are sort of swayed in a way, and to a degree, they're made by the media to feel like it's a bigger suspension than it actually is, when in reality, it's 1 week for someone who's made contact to the head. It's not uncommon.
And just to add a little something, talking about our last topic as well, you did say that you're not too passionate about, Tarek Sims playing Origin or whatever. I wasn't really too passionate on the George Burgess one, just in case anyone's blowing up. I'm not here saying, how dare he get that many weeks? I'm sort of, I'm just looking at it at the other point of view that everyone is looking at it. I like to do that. I like people disagreeing with me, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, it is NRL, in my opinion, guys. One of the best platforms you can share your opinion on rugby league. All the social medias are above. Let's move on to our next question, Oz. We've got the NRL CTE, Sue. We had Michael Carboni on earlier today. Now we're going to bring in Dr. Arbon, the head of Sydney research around brain surgery. You there, Doctor? Okay, we must be having some technical difficulties, so we'll just discuss this between us. And of course, we're not experts on this, but for me, a lawsuit's been brought up against the NRL by 2 major firms. Bannister Law and Cahill Lawyers, I believe. Against the NRL's treatment of players back in the day, saying it wasn't enough to prevent CTE, etc. Now, I need to get this off my chest. Back in the 1980s, CTE was not a thing. The internet was not a thing. There was no research or studies around this. You got knocked out and you didn't get up and keep playing. You were a weak dog who let your team down. Yep. And that's how it was for me playing junior rugby league on the Gold Coast, not 5, 6, 7 years ago. It's only in this last half decade where we have really, and probably more so from the NFL studies than anything that we've got in Australia, have actually seriously been talking about CTE. How come no former players have felt so passionate about this situation? They're going to donate their brain. Oh, wait, they have in the last week. So I don't understand what these lawyers are going to argue. There is no point to be made. How can the NRL set parameters of protection around a subject that no one has any clue about? It's like me asking you, Oz, right now, what the Tyrannosaurus Rex liked to do after it had a feed and was bored. You don't know. I don't know. Yeah. And I'm not going to sue you because you don't know, because there's no study or research behind that. It's crazy. I can't believe it. What have you got on this situation? Another thing I don't like is that the NRL have now brought in precautions to the best of their ability. We have HIA tests. You're not allowed to punch anymore. In junior leagues, a lot of the teams, especially in the Penrith League, I know a couple of teams, if you don't bring your headgear to the game, which is supplied by the club, you don't play. We are bringing in these precautions throughout the game now, why are we looking at something in the past? And you're exactly right. And, being sued for something that happened ages ago, which we have now rectified. But what are they going to ask the NRL to do to fix this when they're already in the process of fixing this? Just to sort of digress, I guess, for a second, this also sort of relates to the argument of why people wonder why we can't bring back the biff. Bring back the biff. That'll make the game better. We need to bring back the biff. If the NRL can get sued for something that happened 20 years ago, around brains and concussion, what have you, what do you think's going to happen if they, quote unquote, bring back the biff? Mm-hmm. This is completely hypothetical here, but, it has happened just within the world, within Australia. What happens if on the field, 2 players get into a punch-on, someone gets king hit and dies? That's the worst case scenario, but let's say it happens. The player who threw the punch would
and I know NRL players get off with a lot, but if you kill someone on the field, I take it you're going to jail.
Depending on the situations, if the other player struck at them first, they could probably argue some form of self-defense and get done with manslaughter. But I do agree. I think minimum, they're probably looking at least 12 months to imprisonment.
Exactly. There's going to be some form of jail time. And I tell you, there are going to be sponsors removing themselves from the NRL.
Oh, yes.
The NRL will be under a lot of media scrutiny.
Yep.
They're going to get sued. Something's going to happen. So that's my argument for why we can't bring back the BIF, because if we can get a media lawsuit for something that happened 20 years ago, that doesn't even, it sort of does involve the BIF a bit, because you can get concussed from getting knocked out, but, not necessarily. So what do you think is going to happen if in this day and age of this extensive research, we now know CTE is a thing. What do you think is going to happen if we now bring back the BIF and stuff like that happens? I know that this is mainly within the older generation, and that eventually, we'll all be happy with the game how it is, and we won't be too worried about bringing the BIF back because we haven't grown up with it. But for those of you listening who think that we should, there's not really an argument that we should, because we can't. We literally can't. There are so many legal ramifications involved that we just cannot do it. And here's sort of a small example why. Because this is really a small issue, and the NRL are getting sued over it. Can you imagine an issue like someone dying on the field from getting king hit? I know it's very unlikely.
It is.
And players can get brain damage and injuries, etc., from fights. If a player is even to get injured from a fight, there are legal ramifications. So I just thought I'd put that out there.
No, I definitely agree with the points you brought up, and I think we both agree that this lawsuit is a cash grab, nothing else, correct?
Correct. And to go off topic again, I know I do it like every episode, but I'm going to quickly turn my light on. It is getting dark in the old Western Sydney town of Penrith, so I'll just be a second.
Western Sydney, A's. All right, guys, we've got 2 more tackles left. Hopefully you are sticking with us on the podcast, enjoying it. We're up to 42 minutes now. We're aiming to go around an hour. We're going to go through our contenders and pretenders. So for those of you that watch the Set of 6 podcast regularly, it's been disrupted now because I was away for the last 3 episodes. But yeah, we go through and we name whether we predict the team will be a contender or a pretender. Contender or a pretender, I'll say that very slow and carefully, come the NRL finals time. So we're going to go through now, Oz. We'll try to keep it nice and short. We don't want to obviously drag on with too many teams, but we'll give our contender or pretender and just a short explanation why. Broncos first. I've got them as pretenders. Their form of recent is absolutely horrid, and probably the first time we've ever seen the club struggle.
Pretenders, too inconsistent.
Next, we have the Raiders. I've got them as contenders at this stage. I do think they have the players to challenge South Sydney, Storm, and the Roosters. They have challenged them to some degree earlier this year, and I wouldn't write them off completely.
Pretenders, they are looking a little bit more inconsistent than they were earlier in the year, and the lack of finals experience. Note that I will be saying this about a fair few teams.
Finals experience is everything. It's no surprise why the Storm, Roosters, etc. are always going deep into the finals. Bulldogs, pretenders, I don't really need to explain that.
Contenders, the world's biggest comeback in any sport.
Titans, pretenders. I think we could both agree on that, unfortunately.
If Michael Gordon hadn't got injured, we would be first right now. That's all I'm going to say.
We'll definitely be looking at a minor premiership at the very least. Probably very likely the premiership also. But Callum Watkins is going to come in and score 7 tries per game and win their Dally M in his short time. Sea Eagles. I'm going to go ahead and say contenders. On paper, I know they don't have a lot of depth and injuries could play into that, but we have a team that are just turning up and playing for each other. And when you have a team like that in rugby league, it's very dangerous. And I'm not at all surprised that they keep winning despite the injury toll that they've had to face.
I'm going to say pretenders. Guess why? Finals inexperience. But didn't majority of those players play in the 2017 finals against the Panthers? Yeah, they got eliminated in the first round, and for a lot of the players, it's the first final series that they'd been to. I don't call that genuine finals experience.
Yeah, but Trent Barrett is a different coach to Desi. I think he'll have him ready come finals.
Desi is a good coach when it comes to finals.
He is a big feather in their cap. Storm, we've both got them as massive pretenders. Obviously, we've got them as contenders. We don't need to explain why. Knights, I'm on the fence here, but I'm going to say contenders. I haven't seen enough to fully convince me on that. But I do think when Mitchell Pearce is playing his best football, we saw them beat the Roosters at home. If they had a finals game at McDonald Jones Stadium, Pearce and Ponga fully fit, I'd probably be inclined to have a little bet on the Knights because they do have that capability to upset teams. Contenders.
Pretenders. Lack of finals experience. Oh no, but wait, Mitchell Pearce has played finals before. Yeah, majority of them. The Roosters had a really regular season. They finished first. They were favourites to win the title. They'd win in the first round in the finals, and then they'd crack under the pressure. I'm sorry to bag out on you here, Mitchell, but it was a lot of not rising to that big game situation, and they would lose.
Warriors, I have pretenders. You need to win more than 2-3 games in a row. Did I have them as contenders last time? I think I did.
I think you might have. You might have had...
No, I had them.
You had them contenders, but you made the argument that
I said
up against the Roosters or the Storm or the Rabbitohs in a finals game. Not saying they would win, but I'm saying they'd be a chance.
No, this is a stitch up. I said I have them as pretenders for now, but if they win this weekend and show me they can be consistent, and they didn't win that weekend, they got smashed. Subsequently, have gone on to not win more than 2 games this year. So, Mini Clarkey, get the hell out of here, mate. I'll give you a 1-2 Mayweather. We both have the Warriors as pretenders.
Use your son. What are you on about? Yeah.
Cowboys, I've got pretenders. I haven't seen enough consistency.
Oh, massive contenders, because if they just had their players, be top 4, definitely. I don't think so. Pretenders. And I'm not even going to say because it's lack of finals experience, because I don't think that they will make the finals. So, pretenders.
Eels, I've got pretenders still for the same issue as above. I haven't seen enough consistency throughout 2019.
Pretenders, not enough consistency and definitely not enough finals.
Panthers, I am going to say pretenders still at this stage, but I think they've won 4 or 5 in a row now. They're slowly building 6 on the trot.
Has it been 6? Maybe okay. 5 or 6.
Yeah. Well, they definitely, I think they are building towards something. Their wins haven't been comprehensive. They've been scrappy, but we are seeing a side that's fighting for their season. Once they get their season back on track, how they respond to that will be whether I label them as a contender or pretender. But for now, I got to stick with pretenders.
Yeah, and Penrith seem to do this every year. Start the season crap and then somehow make the finals. I'm going to say pretenders, and even will say pretenders if they make the finals. But if they are to make the finals, I would put them as more of a contender than the Sea Eagles and the Raiders.
Yeah.
And the Eels, and let's just say the Tigers make it. Even if they squeeze in at 8th, a few of the teams above them, I would be putting them as more of a contender.
I just thought that too, because the Panthers typically always play crap for one stage of the season, and the last 3 years in a row, their crap game has been in the semi-final.
Yeah, it has been in the second week of the finals.
Yeah.
In the first week of the finals too, I believe, was it 2016 or 17? They flogged the Bulldogs in the first round of the finals. I believe it was 2016. 17, they beat Manly pretty easily. 2018, they beat the Warriors pretty easily. And after those weeks, that first week of the finals, people were seeing them as legit contenders for the premiership.
Yeah.
Then they'd go into the second round of the finals. In a couple of those games, they were the favourites, and they'd lose.
It's almost like Panthers don't respond well to outside noise. I mean, they didn't respond well to the outside noise this year, obviously negative around the sex tape scandals, etc. And they obviously don't respond well to positive news either when they're listed as a legit contender, because we've seen 3 years in a row they've gone out the next week and played crap. We both have the Rabbitohs as contenders, I believe.
Really? No, they're going to miss the 8. You know, look at this form slump. It doesn't matter that.
It doesn't matter that Wayne Bennett's come from the Brisbane Broncos, where he has dealt with probably the harshest origin period as any coach ever has over the years. You think when Bennett was there in 2006, etc., Lockyer, Webke, Seven Asiva, Carmichael Hunt, Darius Boyd, I can't even. There was so many. Tony Carroll.
The whole Brisbane
the
side
whole
was
team.
almost playing Origin at one point.
And he's dealt with that. He can deal with this. Rabbitohs, they'll get back on track. Dragons, I'm going to say Pretenders. I don't even think they make the 8 at this stage.
I don't think they make the 8 either, Pretenders. But let's say hypothetically they do make the 8. I automatically see them as more of a contender than a couple of the sides, not only because of the finals experience last year, but because of what they did in the finals last year. I remember going into week 1 of the finals, talking to my mates at school. We were saying how every game could go either way except for the Broncos-Dragons, because the Broncos were just going to flog the Dragons. And I believe that's what a lot of people thought. Yes. But then the Dragons came out and flogged the Broncos and almost beat the South. Yeah, and almost beat the Rabbitohs in the second week of the finals.
3 Adam Reynolds field goals saved them. I remember watching that game. It was just crazy. Reynolds kicks a field goal. I jump up. Oh, Rabbitohs are going to do it. Penalty. Dragons go up by 1. You think, oh, Dragons are going to do this. Then, no, Reynolds gets another field goal, and then we go, I think it was extra point or very late in the game. Reynolds slots a third. That was what finals football is all about for me, that game. That was an incredible game. Roosters, contenders for me. I don't know what's going on with them recently, though. Their performances against the Storm, you can look at it one way. They had 65% completion and 18 errors. You can look at that as a terrible game, or you can look at the fact they only lost by 2 points to a bullcrap penalty. With those sort of stats. If the Roosters can just get their completions up to 80%, they would beat every team. So you have to have them as contenders.
Contenders, and you're lying if you say they're pretenders.
Yeah.
You just...
and Tigers. I've still got them as pretenders.
Pretenders, even if they make the finals, which I've got a ladder predictions update video coming tomorrow, and I forget where I put them, but if they do make the finals, the exact same reason, lack of finals experience.
Tigers are sort of that team. They're not a bottom 4 team. They're not... Well, who would we look at as our bottom 4 teams? For me, I probably have around the bottom 4. Cowboys, Broncos, Titans, Warriors, and Bulldogs. Yeah. They're not in that category, but they're not in the definite top 8. Definite top 8s, your Raiders, Seagulls, Storms, Knights, Rabbitohs, Roosters. So you have the Dragons, Tigers, Panthers, Eels. Those 4 teams there will be the teams between 8 and 12.
And you know what? Guess what? All of those teams' main problem is inconsistency. Yeah. So we really can't bet on exactly who is going to make it because...
You know what I actually really think? I really think this year, the NRL final, I said this on a live on Instagram, we're going to be like Albert Einstein in the last round, figuring out what team needs to win by what to potentially make it. It's going to be so much closer than last year where we realistically knew straight away. Guys, we're going to stay on NRL for our last question. Hopefully you are enjoying the podcast.
Can I just intervene quickly and just give you one quick fact?
Yeah.
And it sort of relates to this current topic. Since 2000, and this is backing up my finals experience thing, so that's why I'm bringing it up.
Yep.
Since 2000, and I could go back further, but I'm just going back there. I believe there's been 20 seasons, including this one. In now 17 of those 20 seasons, the team that has won the premiership has at least made the finals the year before, and for the majority, they've been on a run in the finals. The only 3 teams that have won the premiership after not making the finals the year before were the Penrith Panthers in 2003, the West Tigers in 2005, I believe, and the Sydney Roosters in 2013.
Yeah, it's certainly, I did read that column from you. It did paint in the picture that you do need consistency in the finals to start building towards that premiership. Tackle 6, guys. We're going to be talking about one signing your club could make for 2020. Obviously, the June 30 deadline has passed, so that rules out the rumours of players moving for most Instagram pages, besides one who always has the inside mail, but I think he forgot it's now July 2nd, and Pappenhausen can no longer sign with the Brisbane Broncos. Very interesting stuff there. But yeah, we're going to look forward to 2020, guys. Now, I know I certainly have, and I assume you have also, Oz. Interject if you haven't. We've tried to make these signings realistic. Someone your club could realistically get. Yeah. Because obviously, otherwise I'd say Titans should get Jason Taumalolo and Cooper Cronk. Not going to happen. Yeah. We've looked at someone that we legitimately think that club can land. I'll go down. We'll start. I've got and we won't try to keep you too long. We'll try to keep it relatively simple as to why we've made that selection. Otherwise, we will be here for a very long time. Broncos, Aiden Caesar. I think the arrival of George Williams from the UK is going to disgruntle him a lot. He's going to be stuck in reserve grade, and he spoke to Big League earlier this year and said, I don't want to be playing reserve grade. If he wasn't back in the NRL, he was going to look at his options to move before June 30. He's now back in the NRL, so that's not an issue, but it will be in 2020. I think Darius Boyd either moves to reserve grade centre, retires. I'm not sure what happens there, but Milford's shown me he is a better fullback. I'm putting Milford at fullback. I'm putting Caesar at 5'8", and I'm putting Tom Dearden at number 7, and I'm having Jake Turpin, and if he re-signs, I believe he's about to, and Andrew McCullough battle it out for the 9. That's my Broncos spine. I think they can land Caesar. He's previously lived on the Gold Coast just down the road and loved it. I think he'd be a great addition to that club.
Just quickly before I start, if any of these players have re-signed recently, because I noticed that players had been re-signed by their club. If I got it wrong, I apologise. Guess who I've gone for? Sam Williams.
You think? Yeah, we've both gone for a Raiders half there.
Now, here's the thing I'm thinking with Williams. It's a bit more experience. I'm not even necessarily saying he plays first grade. This is if Milford continues to play in the halves with Dearden. I'm saying Sam Williams.
That's a backup.
I don't know if he'll want to play reserve grade, but with two young halves, it is good to have a bit of that experience there. He has played well for Canberra this year. I don't think we expected him to play as well.
I certainly agree, but are you suggesting Asako to fullback, Corey Oates and Coates as the wingers, Richie Kenner on the wing? When you're making this prediction, because we're both based around the Broncos spine here, in your prediction, are you assuming Darius Boyd remains at 1? Because I'm assuming he retires in mine.
I don't necessarily think he retires.
Okay.
I'm more thinking that Williams will sort of be that backup because I don't think that Boyd will retire. However, with the Broncos making this signing, the smart thing to do would be, I don't know what Darius does, but to move Milford to fullback.
Yep.
And get Dearden in there with an experienced half like Sam Williams.
Yeah, I agree. I think Milford's a better fullback at this stage of his career than Asako. I wouldn't mind carrying Asako on the wing for a little bit more, though. He is having his heels breathed down with, obviously, Xavier Coates. Let's move on to the Raiders. Very interesting that we both picked a Raiders half there, but that's awesome. I've gone with Danny Fualalo from the Canterbury Bulldogs. More so a depth signing, but I do think he'll play a couple games in first grade for them. He's a big prop, and I do think the Raiders could use a big prop on the bench. They have at the bench on the moment Ryan Sutton, Dynamis Louis, etc., etc. And if one of those was to go down injured, I do think Danny Fualalo is a perfect replacement. And I don't think the Bulldogs are realistically interested in re-signing him. They haven't offered him any deal as of yet. I'm hearing the Broncos are interested in him, and so is the Super League. So much so, one of the agents over there was actually hoping to speak to him last night through someone else, through me. So there's definitely interest there for him. I think he'd be a good fit at the Raiders. What do you think?
I like that too, and I've sort of gone a big player to come off the bench. I'm thinking Alvaro. Same reason. Off the bench. There's not much more I can say. Daniel Alvaro.
I think Dan stays with Parra, but he would be great. For the Doggies, I've gone with Jai Field in the 14 jersey there. Leisha coming off contract. I don't think they'll be interested in re-signing him. We know they're building a bit of a war chest as it is conned. So I think Jeremy Marshall-King continues to progress as a hooker. And I think the Bulldogs are lacking points. And Jai Field is the fastest man in rugby league, or so they say. I really think he could come on and blow the game open for the Doggies late, and playing 5'8", wherever you want to play him, I do think he'll be able to bust the game open and get some points for a side that otherwise struggles to do so.
This is an absolute joke because I've gone for a half as well, a young half as well, who was debuted this season, Kate Cust.
You think?
And I'm thinking more long-term as well.
Yep.
I think long-term, build that goddamn club around Lachlan Lewis. I'm saying that right now. We're hearing rumours that he is upset right now, which is absolutely ludicrous. Do everything you can to keep him happy. Get him a halves partner, another young halves partner that they can, because they really need to build that young squad. Because if that's what they do in a couple of years, I'm predicting them not to be premiership contenders, but to be finals contenders.
Yeah.
Okay. They have the players that can build that potential. You just need someone in the halves with Lewis to build that potential with. I believe Kate Cuss can do that. He has played great this season when he has played for Manly. With Cherry Evans out, him and LG, I don't know if they lost a game while Cherry Evans was out. They might have, but they had a pretty good... they lost to the Titans. Do you remember when the Titans used to win games? Kate Cuss.
Yeah, I really like Cade Cuss. He's a really big 5'8" too, and he would complement Lockie Lewis very well. Let's move on to the Titans. Now, I've made this selection based on Michael Gordon retiring.
I was thinking of doing that.
I interviewed him earlier this year, and he said he's not going to press for another contract, but if one is presented, he will consider it. He's now had this pretty serious blood clot, so...
Yep. Can I just make a point quickly on Michael Gordon? From when I have spoken to him as well, we do talk about the Titans, and I don't talk to him too often. We talk about Penrith a little bit. He likes to bring up Penrith, and he says that he sort of misses playing there, and he enjoyed playing there. So, and I don't think this will happen, but sort of, I think he would prefer to stay at the Titans. But I think if he had to say, this is what I think he would say. If he said he had to go to any other club other than the Titans, he'd go back to Penrith.
I don't think he will at this stage of his career, though.
I don't think he will. I don't think he will. But if he had to choose someone else, I think he'd choose Penrith. So that's just something. And they could do with a new fullback, but I'm not. It's probably not the smart move for Penrith.
No. So I've gone with Jordan Kahu. He's on a 1-year deal with the Cowboys. I think he can slot straight into the centre or fullback if AJ Brimson was to get injured at some stage. And he's also, what the Titans do not have without Michael Gordon, a goal kicker.
Yeah.
Who have you got for Titans?
I've gone with someone in the forward pack, which I know we've signed a few forwards. We've got some young forwards, but I'm sort of doing this for experience.
Okay.
I have taken into account if Ryan James comes back, he moves into prop. I've got Alex Glenn for some experience.
Okay, so he starting back row Proctor and Glenn, and you keep Cardi off the bench?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, I like that.
And that's that experience. Or I'm sure Glenn wouldn't mind coming off the bench, and I could see that happening, but I'd have him starting in there with Proctor, Ryan James the prop, Fodawaker starting off the bench.
I'd have him starting also. I think if you bring Fodawaker and Shannon Boyd off the bench with a Cartwright who has the offload ability, you're going to be bending the defensive line, or should be. I mean, we don't very often. It's so disappointing talking as a Titans fan, Oz, because this could happen so easily. Fodawaker and Shannon Boyd off the bench would bend that defensive line. And Fodawaker is so underrated. I've got to get this off my chest. He is the same age as Payne Haas. He played with him at school. He is almost probably just as good as Payne Haas, but he doesn't get spoken about because he's at the Titans. Him and Shannon Boyd would genuinely bend that line, and Cartwright should be able to capitalise on that with some playmaking back row abilities or a simple offload. But it's talk every year.
The thing that frustrates me as well, I shouldn't have to be making a prediction Titans should recruit next year, because I'm a firm believer that they just need to build some goddamn chemistry, because they are really good players. They are really good players, and people that commented on my column on the Titans, basically all of them said they are good players on paper, and as individuals they are really good. You put the Titans players in almost any other team, forgetting who is ahead of them, they probably play well. It just seems that because they're together, and that's why I think they probably need a coach with a bit more experience than Breno. This is a completely other topic, but they just need someone to help them find that chemistry.
Absolutely, I agree. Let's go into the Sea Eagles. I've gone with Manu Ma'u, the Tongan Terminator. I think when you look at Manly on paper, certainly, I wouldn't say this is played out so much into reality, but on paper, they do lack depth from their bench. But they're also losing Joel Thompson next year to the Super League. Not 100% confirmed, but he will go over to Hull FC. And I think Manu Ma'u can either start off the bench for them, or he can go straight into that starting back row.
I've made my pick based off Thompson leaving as well. Josh Aloiai.
Okay.
Is that
Into
how
the
you
back.
pronounce it, Josh?
Yeah.
Josh Aloiai?
Yep.
Yeah, sort of similar reasons to Mau as well. Obviously, Thompson is leaving. Aloiai has still got plenty of years to go. I believe he'll do well in that forward pack, which the starting forward pack is really good. Him and Zero in the second row. And then obviously we know how the team's going to line up from there. So Josh Aloiai.
I do like Josh Aloiai, but I think I prefer him in the middle than on an edge. But he can play
Okay.
on an edge also. Either way, Manly have a pretty dominant forward pack still for next year. Storm, I've gone with nil changes. Their Sunshine Coast Falcons, their feeder club, has only lost one game all year last week. They lost their first game with massive injuries and players out everywhere. And I don't think the Storm need to recruit anyone. Their talent is all there waiting to just get their opportunity.
I'm going to read word for word what I wrote. Melbourne are literally perfect.
There you go.
They've just brought in 3 players. They've upgraded young Grant, who is a hooker who probably won't get a couple seasons at
He
least.
is very good as well.
Yeah,
He is consistently spoken about as the best hooker in Queensland Cup.
Yeah,
and he's
well,
like 20 years old.
And you know what? When Cam Smith retires, the best he's going to get is coming off the bench for Brandon Smith.
Yeah, that's what he'll become.
They've signed Max King, who
just how good is this
come
team?
off the bench.
They had to let Drinkwater go.
Yeah.
Oh, Pappenhausen comes on at fullback, 251 metres. Jerome Hughes is out. Crap, that's a big loss. No, it's not.
And Pappenhausen isn't even going to be the first.
He's stuck on the bench.
Maybe he should go to the Broncos. You know, Milford and Didden in the halves. We've got Pappenhausen at fullback, Sam Williams in reserve grade.
What about their young halves as well? The Queensland Maroons coach's kid, Kevin Walters' kid, Billy's making his debut this weekend, and Cooper Johns, the son of Matty Johns. This club is just incredible. Craig Bellamy, you are a god. Please come to the Titans. I will personally wash your car every Sunday. I will mow your lawn every Thursday. I will cook you dinner 4 nights a week. 5th optional. 6, I will dance for you naked and do anything you want. Please, Bellamy, come to the Titans.
I'll be your live-in maid, and I'll work for free.
Bro,
I don't care. I'll sleep on the goddamn floor.
I would wipe Bellamy's bum for him if he said, Clarkey, get in here. And I'll tell you what, if I wasn't there within 5 minutes, it'd be scary the way he blows up in the box. But yeah, anyway, that's enough of that very weird dream that started as Bellamy as the head coach and ended with me wiping his butt. Let's move on to the Knights. I've gone with nil. They've got great depth for me. Their New South Wales Cup team has a lot of great talent in it also. They've got outside backs there ready. They got Tex Hoy and Phoenix Crossland, who are named in the under-20s origin, halfback and fullback there, obviously to KP and Pearce. And in the back row, they've also got young Beau Fermor coming through, who has a lot. He was the SG Ball Player of the Year last year, guys. He's a very good back rower. So I don't think the Knights need to recruit at all. I think they've got the depth there.
I don't need to either, but coming into this, I thought that we had to pick someone for every team. Obviously, I didn't, but self-explanatory. So I did pick someone for Newcastle, which I don't really see happening. It sort of makes sense for the player, not necessarily as much the Knights, because they got young players in that position coming through.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got Gavin Cooper here, who hasn't been the best for North Queensland.
Don't think he'll leave, though.
I don't think he'll leave either, but it could be good for him. I mean, he had that partnership with Thurston for years, and now that he's gone, he's sort of become a little bit lost. Mm-hmm. Maybe if he was... And I don't even know if he'd start at Newcastle. Maybe? Probably not.
Not when Aiden Guerra returns either.
No. And they've got those young players coming through as well. Maybe if he was to partner up with someone like a Pearce, he's obviously no Jonathan Thurston, but it's that experience as well. Maybe that would help. However, as I said, I'm not too strong on this one, but
yeah,
Gavin Cooper more for the player.
Yep. Warriors, I think with Isaac Luke off contract and Nate Roach unfortunately suffering that ACL injury, that leaves them with Carl Lawton and Jazz Tavanga, the options at hooker. Carl Lawton's been doing pretty well, but it just depends on how they want to play this out. The Warriors struggle with consistency, and one player that's not going to come on and really do anything wrong, he's just going to tackle and pass the ball, Michael Leisha. And I've also put Seguiaro there as an option also. Not sure if he'd be interested in a move to New Zealand. He did struggle overseas in the UK, but New Zealand and UK, different parts of the world, obviously, and he would be over in Australia every second weekend regardless. Just depends how the Warriors want to look at it. Do they want a flashy hooker that can come on and create points, or a consistent hooker that's just going to tackle and feed the ball?
Yeah, I think that Luke will resign. Was there rumours earlier this year that there was rumours that he was going to the Eels, but there were also then rumours that close to re-signing with the Warriors. So I'm not sure. I think he will resign. I haven't gone with a hooker. I've gone with a centre. Now, I'm not too strong on this one either. With these last few, I was a bit pressed for time. So for a couple of them, I sort of just had a quick think. I've gone, and this one as well, not as much now, but at the start of the season is more for the player. I've gone Michael Jennings. Now, as I said, I'm not too strong on this one. They don't really, and it's weird because the Warriors haven't been playing too well. They don't improve too much, right? On paper, their players are pretty good. I have gone Michael Jennings here more for the player as well. I think at the end of this season, even if he has a good year, there will be the conversation coming up that the Eels don't want him. And look, he will probably end up in the Super League, but just for this, because I noticed with the Warriors, they could improve a bit. They don't really have to, but I've just gone Michael Jennings, and you know what, experience, and he has had some good games for the Eels this year.
Yeah, not a bad option there. For the Cowboys, I've gone with Kurt Capewell from the Cronulla Sharks. Ability to play centre. If they do lose Jordan Kahu, they'll need a centre. But also, I think the Cowboys at the moment need a bit of competitive fire in the back row to bring the best back out of Cohen Hess and Gavin Cooper. I'm assuming Cooper's re-signed in this situation, but I think Capewell will add that spark for positions again and bring out the best in some of the other back rows of the club.
Yeah, I've gone with their centre because they really need to improve that back line. They really do. I've gone with Brad Parker from the Manly Sea Eagles because he's been good this year.
He has been good this year.
He's been a shining light, as in we didn't expect much from him, but I think he will re-sign with Manly. But North Queensland, make him an offer.
He might not re-sign with Manly, though. If Dylan Walker re-signs with Manly, Moses Sully will line up in the opposite centre. It just really depends on what Dylan Walker decides to do, I would say, being the bigger name player out of the two. For the Eels, I'm going to go exactly off my notes here, Oz. I've got Parsi, and my notes say Parsi plus Pulu equals demolition.
Okay.
That's my pick. What's yours?
That's it.
That's all I got to say.
I've gone with someone, again, who they probably won't be able to sign. It's someone with a bit of versatility, someone who is a bit underrated because of the team he's playing in. You call him Mr. Fix-It, Mitch Orbison.
Yeah, I just don't know if he would leave.
I don't. It's weird that the Roosters haven't offered him something already. They may have, but I've not heard anything. He should remain loyal to the Roosters, but let's say, which could happen, I don't think it will, they want to free up a little bit more cap space. They would probably have to let Orbison go, and he's a bit of a cool head. As you said, Mr. Fix-It, reliable. The Eels, for me, they either have young players who are currently reliable, who we don't know how they will be as they develop, or good players that aren't reliable every week. Blake Ferguson's been a bit inconsistent, Mitchell Moses, etc. Mitch Orbison we sort of don't know because he has been consistent with the Roosters, but I think he's the type of player that would play consistently for the Eels. Not necessarily the best player on the park every week, but someone who would definitely help you out.
And the Eels do need consistency. For the Panthers, I think they're struggling a little bit at hooker, so I've gone with Britt, the young hooker. I think he made his debut earlier this year for the Rabbitohs. Damien Cook himself said he reminds me a lot about myself. He can get out of dummy half with quick scoots, and he's a good defender. And I think the Panthers, especially with Soni Katoa coming off contract, obviously Mitch Kenny's looking good, but just bring in that extra competition for spots. You've already got 3 hookers at the club. Why not bring in the third one again? And I think Britt will definitely put pressure on Egan and Kenny for a spot in that top 17.
The thing is, I was looking at a hooker. However, with the hookers that are off contract, I believe it's not enough for Penrith to go and get a new hooker because I believe they'll be in a similar situation to a Wade Egan or a Mitch Kenny, who they are young, they've got a lot of promise. That's what I see with a lot of the hookers. I think if there was, there could be Seguiara, but I don't think they'll go with him.
I don't think they will. Do you think they need someone like a consistent experience? Do you think like he's like the only one off contract. I know he's a pretty bad NRL player. Someone like Alicia, if there was someone like him available, same experience.
No, I with all due respect to Michael Alicia, I think Penrith would be aiming higher if they were going for a hooker. You know, why go and this is the argument against Britain, I guess you could say. Why go and get someone who is in a similar position to the players you already have? It would bring competition, but right now they're all still sort of promising. I think if Penrith were to go and get a hooker, it'd be someone who is a first grade, first class hooker. But anyway, onto my pick. I've gone with someone now. There have been rumours that Regan Campbell-Gillard will be leaving at the end of the year. Personally, will. So this is based if he does leave. And this is someone that they would have to pay a little bit of money for. And I don't know exactly how much money Campbell-Gillard's on, but I'd say might be able to cover it. George Burgess. Now, they need a bit of aggression, I'd say, in the forward pack. Not as much anymore, but a few weeks ago, that's something they were really lacking. Yeah. Obviously, from what we saw this weekend, George Burgess can be aggressive.
Yeah.
They do need someone who can start full-time alongside Tamo, because I see Fisher Harris more as that lock.
Yep.
So I think George Burgess is the guy out of the... I'd prefer other players, obviously, but out of the options, I'd go with George Burgess.
Yeah. If he's available, I think they look at him, but I don't think they're overly too keen. Rabbitohs, I've gone with a man you've already said, Josh Aloiai, just to bolster that forward pack and bolster the loss of George Burgess, because, you know, off contract at the end of this year, unlikely they re-sign him. As I said, when you mentioned him for Manly, I prefer him more as a front row, so I think he can come off the bench, provide a bit of energy for that Rabbitohs side, like George Burgess does currently.
I'm going to go with someone that you've already mentioned, Ignatius. More to come off the bench. Off the bench, impact player. He is almost the perfect, I'd say, impact player off the bench. I know when he was at the Titans, he would play his best football coming off the bench. And, you know, in a forward pack that's already packed of great, you know, international representative talent, him coming off the bench is only going to help.
I really like Parsi. I'm still really upset that we let him and Pulu go. I think they could have been staples of our forward pack. Dragons, I've gone with Jacob Liddell. He's off contract at the end of 2019, and it hasn't been officially announced, but I have confirmed they are losing Reece Robson on a 4-year deal from 2020. A bit of backup for Cam McInnes in case he goes down injured. But I also like Liddell coming on at 14. He is a dangerous hooker, probably not an 80-minute hooker yet, but he can provide brief stints of energy from the bench. So that's who I'd be looking to sign.
I've gone with Sorensen. From the Sharks, Sorensen.
Yeah.
As again, a lot of these players are sort of impact players off the bench. I think he can do a job for them off the bench. It was hard for the Dragons because on paper, you look at their side when they're fit, and even with a couple of their young players come through, they don't really need to sign anyone. But because of the form they've been in, you sort of have to question that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean, I'd go with Sorensen, probably because they have been out of form, but on paper, they really shouldn't have to sign anyone.
Yeah, and that's what I've got for the next team. Roosters, I've got nil. They're in a premiership winning state at the moment. I don't think they'll need to sign too many people over the next couple of years.
I got re-sign Orbison.
Yep.
He is... So
let's start with the Roosters are going to sign someone. They're going to have a little bit of money from Cronk's $1 million. I wouldn't say it's the whole million like the media would have us believe, because they'll need to re-sign Joey Manu and Latrell Mitchell, and they'll definitely be receiving upgrades. They need to re-sign Jake Friend, Jared Hargraves within the next 2 years, Mitchell Orbison, as you said, Matt Ikavalu, Isaac Liu. There's a couple big names there. So I forget this notion that the Roosters have $1 million to spend. They just... unless they want to lose all these other players, they don't.
Has the deal for Kyle Flanagan gone through yet? Because they were trying to get him in a mid-season deal, which I didn't quite get. But what I heard, most reports that I heard said they've missed out on him for 2019, but they'll get him for 2020. Yeah. Which, if they do get him,
they have got. I think they have got him for 2020. So the way it works, and I only figured this out a while ago. Also, if a player manager tells me someone signed somewhere, etc., obviously you can't quote them or anything because the first person that needs to officially announce the release is the club itself. So because the Sharks haven't officially announced he's released, the Roosters can't announce the signing. Same thing as Reece Robson. The club hasn't officially announced his release, so the Cowboys can't announce they've signed him, and we can't get any official word anywhere on that. But yeah, Kyle Flanagan. We could have both just named him as our man to sign.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what is going to happen with guys like Lockie Lamb, because it looks like probably more Lockie Lamb was getting bred to play first grade once Cronk retires. But I'm sorry, just looking at how Kyle Flanagan has played since he's made his debut, he's a shoo-in. From what we've seen so far, and I tell you what, he reminds me a bit of Cronk. I'm not saying he won't be as good, but
in terms of Lockie Lamb's career, I don't even see him as the second fiddle half. I think they move Latrell into 5/8 and Keary or Flanagan to halfback if there was an injury there. So maybe Lockie Lamb will be forced to change clubs. And my last one, I've got Api Coruscant for the West Tigers player to target. Obviously under contract at Manly, but you would know yourself. We wrote a column regarding him and Manasseh Fayenu earlier this year. It seems one of them has to go. They are sharing game minutes, which is odd for hookers. Generally, you have your hooker on for 1 hour, your other hooker to finish the last 20 minutes and bring some energy. But these two are genuinely 55-45, I believe it was, sharing minutes, which is rare. I can't think of another situation where we've had that in rugby league.
And Fayenu is statistically better this season, I believe, is he?
Yeah, statistically, he was better in every area. I think he made a couple less tackles, but his offensive output far made up for that. So, just interesting. And I do think if the Tigers came knocking, particularly the fact Des Hasler loves to build his own rosters, I'd say Coruscant's on about 500k. That's for Desi. That's cash money. Cha-ching, cha-ching. See you later. I'm gonna sign Kieran for him. That's probably what Desi's thinking.
I was going to go Coruscant, but you know what? It is just those deals that make so much sense that I genuinely believe that it will happen. Yep. Like I think that even though there's been no rumors or whatever, and it makes that much sense that I think it will happen. So I've actually gone for a half, replacing Benji Marshall, who is now off contract, and we don't know if he's retiring at the end of this year or not. I'm probably going to say he will. He's had his swan song now for New Zealand. I hope he plays in the finals with the Tigers, one last finals run. So I've gone with a replacement for him now. Obviously, there has been issues with this player, not mentally, but physically in his brain. So I think you know who I'm talking about, but who I think would be a decent addition to the West Tigers would be Tamari Martin.
Where does that leave Josh Reynolds, though? Released back to the Bulldogs, or
they'll have to release him, I think. And I don't think the Tigers, from what I've seen, are too keen on Reynolds anymore. Yeah, I saw something that sort of upset me a little bit the other day. Triple M are doing some Origin-based giveaway or something, I think it is. I didn't look too much into it. But Josh Reynolds is the one promoting it, and he's in the Blues gear and everything, and he's promoting it. And I thought, a few years ago you were playing Origin,
he reserve grader doing Tamari Martin was a Tigers junior, I believe. Panthers grabbed him after that.
Yeah, so
it does certainly make sense.
All right, I hope Martin is going to be okay.
Oh, definitely. That's one of those injuries where it doesn't matter who you support. You all rally behind that player. It's terrible.
I've heard rumours of retirement, not as heavily as we heard Fraser Pritchard, who eventually did, but I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, certainly. So, guys, that is going to wrap up the podcast. We went a little bit over. We went for an hour 20. We're aiming for about an hour, but the last segment did drag on a bit. Hopefully not too much for your ears or eyes, depending on whether you're viewing or listening through podcasts, guys. Thanks so much for being here, guys. If you have made it this far and you did enjoy the show, any suggestions, anything you have, our DMs are always open, and you can contact us via any of the means right above us if you're watching by video. If not, best way to get me is on Instagram at Clarkey's NRL column, and same for Oz at NRL, in my opinion, guys. Thanks so much for watching. As I said again, we'll see you next week for another podcast, set of 6. Cheers, guys. Oz, over to you.
Warriors 50-0.